Welcome to part 2 of a butcher's guide to cheap alternatives to popular cuts. Today I'll be covering alternatives to beef tenderloin and skirt/hanger steak. This series was written to be watched sequentially, so pause this video to check out part 1 if you haven't seen it yet. I'll link it in the description below. It just has a bunch of useful information to help you understand some of the meat jargon I'll be using in this video. That being said, let's get right into it. The first cut I want to talk to you about today goes by a bunch of different names, but I'll be calling it by the name of the muscle, teres major, just because that's how I first learned it. This lean, small, pound-and-a-half muscle is one of the most tender on the entire animal and makes a great, affordable substitute for beef tenderloin, which we all know is the most expensive cut of beef. Like the cuts discussed in my first video, the teres major is once again located in the forequarter of the cow in the chuck primal, but it's actually from a different subprimal called the shoulder clod. Unfortunately, the steak that came off my animal at the shop this week was a pretty thin one, but most of the time they're substantially thicker. This means you can cut them into little medallions just like a fillet if you want, but it also cooks up great as a whole muscle. The main difference between the teres major and beef tenderloin is that the teres is slightly less tender, but will easily be a third of the price of a fillet, so I'd say that's a pretty fair trade-off. If a hanger, a flank, and a skirt steak all got together and had a little baby, it would be the next cut I want to talk to you about, bavette. This fairly large cut comes from the hind quarter of the cow in the flank primal, and just like hanger and skirt steaks, is a diaphragm muscle. It's substantially thicker than a skirt steak with a pretty prominent grain that takes a marinade really well. I love cooking bavette up to use in tacos, but it makes a great standalone steak as well with a little salt and pepper. You'll easily be able to get this cut for 20% cheaper than skirt or hanger, so what's not to like about it? Knowing cheaper alternatives to expensive name brand cuts is one way to be able to afford high quality local beef, but another way is to simply eat less beef when you do buy it. If you're an American like me, chances are you're eating too much meat right now. The USDA, for example, only recommends eating between 5 and 6.5 ounces of meat per day. Your body just doesn't need the Fred Flintstone 16 to 24 ounce tomahawk slab in one sitting. On top of that, while eating local animals is certainly the more ethical and tasty choice, it doesn't really do much to reduce the massive carbon footprint that beef production has. I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. Buy less meat, buy local, more ethical meat, keep your money in your community, and support humane, sustainable farming practices. That's it for today's video. Please consider liking it and maybe subscribing to the channel if you dug it. It really does help me out and I'd appreciate it a lot. If these beef cut videos do well, I'll totally come out with another one in the future. All right, that's it. Later, nerds. Crash Coast Kitchen. Crash Coast Kitchen. It's hard to say.